The following video features one of Georgia's exceptional teachers demonstrating engaging, research-based and standards-based instruction in an authentic Georgia classroom. This video series is intended to help instructional leaders identify lessons and strategies used in the classroom that help students master the standards. As you watch the videos, please notice the instructor's best practices along with the appropriate student behavior that are reflected in the standards-based classroom instructional framework.
I'm Tori Sinco. I teach 5th grade at Avery Elementary in Canton, Georgia. I have 31 students in my class, and they range in abilities from gifted students to students that have IEPs. I have students that exited ESOL last year, and many students that would qualify for the early intervention program. This is our 7th lesson in our memoir unit. So in this lesson, we have selected our seed idea and begun to think about crafting our memoir. And the students in this lesson are thinking about the structure that they will choose for their memoir and how that structure will help to bring across their meaning. All right, writers, I'm telling you this because when writers want to study the structure of a text, it helps if we read it as if we're flying above it, like we're looking down from an airplane. So I'm going to show you what I mean. I want you to look at this excerpt of a text of Paul Auster's memoir, Invention of Solitude. And as I'm reading it, I'm not looking at the details that he's using or the word choice. We're looking simply at the structure, so large chunks of text, what type of writing that is, and how it fits together for the larger meaning and a larger structure. All right, writers, so will you join me in looking at this memoir and trying to figure out what structure was used here by the author? So one thing I'm noticing right away is that it seems to be kind of like a list. Are you noticing that as well? Okay, so I'm noticing that it's kind of like a list. You know, he gave himself a new name. He would refuse to answer. He remembers running out of the house and lying in the middle of the road. So I'm noticing it looks a bit like a list. Now I want to see if there's anything else I can notice about it. So I'm going to go back to the text again. One thing I see right away is that all of these memories that are listed out are linked together by the refrain of he remembers. Do you see that listed over and over again? So that's kind of hooking everything together. Okay. All right, writers, if you'll turn that text over, I'm going to give you an opportunity to try this as well. Now, this is a memoir that we're familiar with. This is an excerpt from The House on Mango Street that we read in reading. So what I want you to do is you're going to read over it, not looking at the details, but like you're flying over it in the airplane, looking out the window. I want you to look for large chunks of text that you can decide on their structure, what type of writing that is, and how it fits together in the piece. All right, so go ahead and take a look at it, and then I'd like you to turn and talk to your neighbor about what you're noticing about the structure of the piece. Brooke, Katie T, Zach, Spencer, and Meredith, will you come up and join me on the floor and bring your writing? During the small group in this lesson, I pulled a group of students that I'd noticed in their writing were writing great stories, but they weren't giving a lot of meaning behind their story. They weren't bringing out the theme, which is what we're trying to do in our memoir unit. So I pulled those group of students together so that we could go through a text that they're familiar with. We used 11 that we've read before and have them try to identify how the author brought forth the meaning in that text using internal and external storylines, and then apply that work to their own writing. Okay, writers, so I've given you a piece that you're familiar with. We've read 11 many times, okay? So something I've noticed when I've looked inside of your writer's notebooks is you're writing lots of stories for your memoirs, but I noticed that, remember, in this unit we're writing something, not just writing a good story, which you're all really great at doing, we're writing something that has meaning, right? Because in the end, our memoir is supposed to say, kind of, this is who I am as a person. Okay, so one thing I noticed when I was looking in your notebooks is you're writing lots of stories with lots of details, but I'm not sure that the meaning of your theme of your story is coming across when you're writing it. So that's something I wanted us to look at today. So I've given you 11, and we know that this piece is structured with some essay and some narrative, right? So I'm going to go down to the narrative part of it. And one thing that writers do to bring out that meaning in their writing is they include what's called the external and the internal storylines. So the external is kind of what's happening on the outside, so what you're doing or what's happening around you, what you're noticing. And the internal, what do you think that is?
What's happening in the story.
Okay, but the external is still happening in the story, right? Because in my story...
The internal might be happening deep in the story.
Okay, deep in the story. What do you think, Meredith?
Would it be like something that's happening, like would it be the meaning of
We're
the
getting
story?
to it with the meaning. In stories, we've talked about good writers put in feelings, right? We talk about that in our narrative unit. So the external storyline is what's happening, and the internal is kind of what you're feeling when you're reacting to that. So a lot of good writers, when they're trying to bring out that meaning, kind of go back and forth between the two. So I want us to look into 11. You can go ahead and use your pens, and you can talk with each other. I want you to find some place where you think it's the external storyline, where something's happening to the author of 11. And then I want you to see if you can find a place where you think it's the internal storyline, where she's explaining how she's feeling. So let's go ahead and just take a glance. When you find something, point it out to your partner next to you. Let's see if we can find something in here. Like, I'm noticing something in the very last paragraph on that very first page. Can you kind of zero in there?
Yeah.
Please note, this is a snapshot of effective instructional practices in one classroom, and effective instruction varies with the standards and lessons. For more examples and resources, view the other videos in the series and visit GeorgiaStandards.Org.